Good morning. Welcome back to the Red Mic. Happy Friday. It's hashtag Fun Friday, and these are Red Mic messages. Thanks for being here. Today's Red Mic message is an atomic lesson from WKRP. If you get a chance, go back and look at old WKRP in Cincinnati episodes. It presents all this stuff as almost a satirical look at the radio industry. But if you've ever worked in radio, there are people, or at the very least, there are character types that you see and recognize. Johnny Fever, Johnny Caravello, Johnny Midnight, Johnny Sunshine, whatever you want to call him. He's got dozens of names because he's been all around the country. If you've been in radio, you know somebody like that. I actually worked with a guy at one radio station. His air name was Buzz. I'm not going to give his full name, but he was this old radio burnout with a bad wig and a bad attitude, actually. When he was off the air, he was one of the most disagreeable people I'd ever been around in real life. Had a complete and utter disdain and certainly a disrespect for the audience. But man, when he flipped on that mic, he was smooth as velvet. And you wouldn't know from the way he acted when he cracked that mic what he really thought. In that regard, he was a consummate professional. But again, old burnout, cynical, lonely guy, really. And then, of course, I worked with people that were also consummate professionals, but they loved and respected the audience a great deal. Another aspect of the Johnny Fever character is the longtime veteran who knows so much about music and about life. And that's my friend Joe Martin, Mad Martin, just fantastic guy. And then then you've got Big Jim Russell and Keith Vaughn and all the people that are just fantastic people. And one of my former bosses at KYYI Hot Country, his real name was Jim Sharp, but his air name was James Bond. During the 1979 tornado, he actually went out and broadcast live in Wichita Falls to talk about what was going on. And you can still find those recordings online if you want to look for them. Look for James Bond, Wichita Falls tornado. You'll be able to find them. Anyway, said all that to say this: WKRP, if you've ever been in radio, it is a little slice of life. Almost every character on that show, you've probably found somebody similar to it in real life, all the way down to the obnoxious salesman. When I was in sales, I did everything I could to not be like Herb Tarlick. Anyway, but there's a scene in WKRP in Cincinnati where the cleaning lady befriended Venus, aka Gordon Sims, and she tells a story about her son Arnold basically running with a bunch of unsavory guys, and she's worried about him. He's going to quit school and the whole thing. Well, Venus makes arrangements to meet Arnold. He says, "Tell you what, you say you can't learn anything, and what you do learn, you don't need to know." He said, "I'll make a bet with you. I bet I can teach you the basics of the atom in about 2 minutes. You'll understand it perfectly, and you'll remember it for months, if not forever." Arnold laughs, of course, and he says, "You're crazy." Well, Venus presses, and he says, "All right." He said, "Pay attention." He draws this big circle. He says, "There are these 3 gangs on the street." And he said, that's a territory. This is the neighborhood. Right in the middle, he draws a circle. He says, right in the middle of this neighborhood is a gang. Gang lives here. They're called the New Boys. Now, they're just very neutral. They're easygoing. They're even. And on the outside of the edge of the neighborhood is this other gang, some real negative dudes. They call themselves the Elected Ones. And he draws them circling the outside. He said, they don't like nothing. They're always circling, checking out the New Boys. Now, the New Boys see this and they figure something wrong. So they make a deal with another gang, a really positive group of guys. They call themselves the Pros. Pros got all the good looking women. You know what I'm talking about. And Arnold smiles and says, yeah. He says, now the Pros and the Elected Ones hate each other so much they keep the same number of members. If there's 10 Elected Ones, there's 10 Pros. He asked Arnold, how many gangs are there? And he says, 3. He says, who are they? He said, New Boys, Elected Ones, and the Pros. And he said, and who's out here? The Elected Ones. What are they? Negative. Who's positive? The Pros. Taps the center. He says, they call their hangout the nucleus, and that's where the Pros and the New Boys are. He says, Arnold says, man, that's a tough word. And he says, well, it's Latin, but I kind of think it's Swahili, means center. Arnold says it a few times, and then he's got it, right? And basically, he ends up making all of this entire thing a lesson. Arnold doesn't realize that he's actually learning about the atom. When he gets to the end, he says, "All right, time for you to go back to school." And he was like, "I didn't learn anything about the atom." He said, "Yeah, you did. You know everything." And he says, "What's this right here?" He says, "That's the nucleus." He says, "Who are these guys?" And he tells him during the lesson he had said that there was a word called tron or ton that applied, and they put it all on the end of their name because it meant dude. He says, "Who are these guys?" The electrons. They positive or negative? Negative. It basically goes through the entire thing: protons, neutrons, electrons. And Arnold nails it cold. And he says, "That's the atom." He said, "You're going back to school, Arnold. You got an A." He was meant to be a teacher. He was a great nighttime DJ, but he was meant to be a teacher. And that's the whole scene. No gimmick, no miracle cure, no guarantee. Venus Venus refused to let anybody tell him, or even the kid tell him, that he was stupid. And he refused to let the system crush him under its heel. So, and yeah, that lesson really wasn't for Arnold. It was Venus remembering his life before he was a DJ. He didn't quit teaching because he couldn't teach. He quit because he had other reasons, but you need to go and watch WKRP for that. Sometimes it takes a piece of chalk and the courage to speak somebody else's language to get through to them. If someone's not learning, check the language before you judge their ability. Respect is a prerequisite for understanding. Rigor does not require rigidity, and the best leaders and the best teachers translate complexity into meaning. And every once in a while, if you can help somebody understand something, it might remind you of who you are at your core and maybe some of the things that you need to know, you need to learn, you need to put into practice in your own life. And that's today's Red Mike message. Hashtag Fun Friday. Again, if you get an opportunity, look up any of these. In fact, go check out YouTube and look for Venus Teaches the Atom for the entire scene. You'll see the parts I left out, but the gist is the same. It's all there. And a few of my favorites from WKRP, of course, are the Thanksgiving episode. Oh my God, they're turkeys. One of my other favorites involves the transmitter site and a BOMB threat. Johnny Fever saying, "Man, the phone cops, they're everywhere." Check them out. Great show, little slice of life from the late 70s, early 80s. I love you guys. Go out and have a great weekend. I'll see you next time. And until next time, don't forget, as always, life is short. Drink the bourbon.